Martha Hale pushed through a broken gate while two farmers laughed beside their truck. $350 for cursed dirt? One shouted. She kept walking. Frost silvered every pasture beyond the fences, yet a narrow strip along an old stone wall stayed dark, damp, and green. Kneeling, she pressed bare fingers into the soil, then studied the white fields surrounding the acres she had just purchased. Something about everyone's warning felt wrong. Nothing useful grew here, the locals claimed. Still, that patch told another story. From inside her coat came a notebook. She marked the date with a pencil. Maybe this place wasn't dead. Before continuing, "Where are you watching right now?" Only the empty road answered. The two farmers had already driven away, leaving Martha alone with the frost, the broken gate, and a farm nobody wanted. She tucked the notebook back into her coat and walked toward the old stone wall, watching how the white crust stopped several feet before reaching it. That seemed too neat to be chance. Near the barn, trouble outnumbered promise. Boards sagged. A rusted pump leaned beside a dry trough. Weeds crowded the fence line, and shallow dips held black water that smelled of leaves and iron. By noon, Earl Jensen from the neighboring place wandered over carrying a coffee tin. "You really bought this ground?" "Paid cash." A low whistle escaped him. "Folks tried corn here, beans, too, even alfalfa. Never lasted." Martha glanced toward the wet strip. "What happened?" "Depends who you ask." Earl shrugged. "Bad soil, cold pockets, too much water. My father just called it cursed." Once he left, Martha walked slow lines across the property, pressing a stick into soft spots and marking stones with scraps of red cloth. The green weeds weren't scattered randomly. They followed a faint curve through the field. Several feet away, the grass looked pale and brittle. That evening she returned with a kitchen thermometer and pushed it into the soil beside the wall. Another reading came from a patch near the road. The first was higher. Twice more, Martha wiped the metal clean and tested nearby ground beneath ordinary grass. The difference wasn't large. Still, she wrote both numbers down. Before sunrise the next morning, Martha came back carrying stakes, string, and a question nobody else had bothered asking. Why did some parts of the farm stay warmer than others? She drove a stake beside the wall, stretched string across the field, then placed small markers every 20 feet. At each point, she checked the ground, recorded the temperature, and noted whether frost remained. 3 mornings passed before a pattern began to form. The lowest hollow near the road froze hard before dawn, while the strip beside the stones stayed slightly warmer. Another patch near a line of reeds did the same. Martha circled both places in her notebook and added one word beside them. "Why?" Earl noticed the stakes on his way past. "You surveying for buried treasure?" "Maybe." He laughed. "You'll find rocks." By the 5th morning, Martha had measured enough spots to know the difference was real. Small, yes, but steady. Now she watched other things too, where water collected after sunset, which grass dried first, where fog settled, and which direction the coldest wind seemed to move. None of it gave her an answer yet. If you enjoy stories where patience notices what everyone else overlooks, subscribe, because Martha's strangest clue was still ahead. That afternoon, she followed the green strip farther than before and found a shallow depression hidden beneath weeds. At its center, the soil remained soft despite several dry days. Pulling away dead grass, she found a thin line of moisture shining between 2 buried stones. Martha touched it, then looked uphill. No pipe, no ditch. Yet something beneath that field was feeding water through the ground. She marked the spot with another stake and decided to wait for the next cold morning before making any larger move. One more dawn would give Martha the proof she wanted. She returned before daylight with her thermometer, notebook, and a lantern wrapped in cloth so the flame wouldn't ruin her night vision. Frost covered the road ditch like powdered glass. At the marked depression, however, the soil was still soft. Another reading confirmed it. Warmer again. Following the damp line uphill, Martha moved slowly between weeds until it disappeared beneath a tumble of flat stones. When she pulled two aside, cold water seeped around her boots. The discovery puzzled her. The water itself felt chilly, yet the surrounding ground had not frozen. Later, Earl stopped beside the fence and watched her clearing stones. "You planning to drain the whole place?" "Not yet." "Then what are you doing?" "Trying to understand where the water goes." He shook his head. "That water's always been trouble." Maybe it had. Martha wasn't ready to argue. Over the next week, she mapped each wet patch, stone line, hollow, and slope. Another detail emerged. On calm nights, the coldest air seemed to settle toward the lower road, while the higher strip beside the wall stayed clearer. So she made a small test. 2 short rows of turnips went into the ground from the same seed packet. Martha planted one beside the damp stone line and the other near the lower fence where frost usually gathered. Both received the same water. Neighbors called it wasted effort. Martha called it comparison. Then October brought another hard freeze. This time she needed an answer she could trust completely. At first light, Martha crossed the yard toward the 2 rows. The lower plants near the fence looked silver and stiff, with several leaves collapsed against the soil. Beside the stone line, the turnips were still standing. She stopped. One leaf, then another, went between her fingers. A little frost clung to the tips, but most of the plants remained firm and green. The difference was too large to ignore. Earl came over later and stared across both rows. "Well," he said, "that's peculiar." Martha smiled. "That's one word for it." For several nights she watched the field after sunset and compared every clue she had recorded. Buried water moved beneath the warmer strip. Old stones absorbed heat during the day and released it slowly after dark. Meanwhile, heavier cold air slipped downhill and collected near the road instead of settling across the upper ground. Nothing mystical was happening. The farm had its own tiny climate. For years, people had planted without paying attention to where cold air traveled, where moisture kept moving, or which ground held warmth longest. When crops failed in the wrong places, they blamed the land. Martha saw something else, a chance. Carefully, she expanded the test with hardy greens, onions, and late carrots along the protected strips. She cleared only enough stone to improve water flow and left the warmest sections mostly untouched. Neighbors still joked when they passed, but not as often. By early November, a harder freeze arrived. Martha no longer hurried outside with the same doubt. She knew exactly which part of the farm would reveal whether her theory could survive a deeper cold. Before sunrise, frost shone across every neighboring pasture. Earl's lower field was white from fence to creek. Corn stubble snapped under his boots, and even weeds beside the road had folded beneath ice. Across Martha's protected rows, green still showed. The turnips beside the stone wall stood firm. Onion tops bent slightly, yet they hadn't frozen through. Carrot leaves still held their color. Down in the lower comparison section, the plants were ruined. Earl climbed the fence without joking. "How'd you do that?" "I didn't," Martha said. "The land did. I just stopped fighting it." Her notebook showed him the temperature marks, the underground water line, and the slope carrying cold air downhill. Nothing on the farm had changed overnight. The difference was that someone had finally paid attention. By the next season, Martha planted only where the land gave her an edge. She restored blocked channels, rebuilt loose stone borders, and left the lowest frost pockets for pasture instead of vegetables. Her harvest came later than everyone else's. That became the advantage. When nearby gardens were finished for the year, Martha still carried fresh greens, carrots, onions, and turnips into town. Buyers paid more because little local produce remained. Each autumn, the $350 farm people had called cursed earned a little more. Soon, neighbors stopped laughing when they passed her gate. Some brought thermometers, others carried notebooks. Earl brought both. Martha never claimed she had beaten winter. She had simply learned where cold moved, where warmth lingered, and how a farmer could work with both. That was the real secret hidden beneath the frost all along. The farm had never been cursed. It had only been misunderstood. Martha's reward came from watching closely, asking simple questions, and trusting what the land showed her. Sometimes value hides where everyone else stopped looking. Subscribe for more stories about people who saw possibility where others saw nothing at all.